Warning, we are not your attorneys. Please, don't take anything we say as legal advice. I'm Geoff.
I'm Mike.
And I'm Derrick.
And you are listening to the Not So Grand Jury,
which is now sponsored by Morwa P. LLC. And we're back. For the record, for the listener, we had just recorded episode 14, which was season 10, episode 10 of King of the Hill, and we're jumping right into another King of the Hill episode. I was sober before, and now I've poured alcohol, because one of you guys had to bring up Trump and tariffs and other things, and I got
brought
sad.
Up Trump. I just brought up some hypothetical situations that somebody could do.
Hypothetical situations that are currently happening at the exact moment in the exact factual pattern that you may be put in the hypothetical terms. So now I have a pretty full glass of whiskey, for the record. Anyway, Mike, take it away. Second King of the Hill.
This week we're doing season 11, episode 12 of King of the Hill, Lucky's Wedding Suit. In this episode, Lucky and Luann, Tom Petty and Brittany Murphy are planning their wedding. Luann is envisioning some extravagant affair that she can't possibly afford. Lucky, we should have probably gone over this in the last episode. Do you guys know how Lucky got his name Lucky?
No idea.
Yeah, Lucky. Why they call you Lucky? True story. I was at Costco one day and all of a sudden the nature called. Yelled is more like it. So I hightail it into the John and there's some sensitive guy changing his little boy's diaper on one of them baby ironing boards. And don't you know I slipped on pee-pee and broke 2 vertebrae which had to be fused together? I'm in constant pain, but by God, I got me a $53,000 settlement.
This sumbitch is never gonna have to work another day in his life.
That's why they call me Lucky.
That's a great story.
Won $53,000. That's why he's lucky.
Okay, so I was going to ask, and I know we're about to get into it, I was going to ask what the first settlement that they were talking about was, that he was running out of settlement money.
Some background is, this character pops up, I think in season 8, maybe, and he's just in the background as a character who won some money in a settlement and is just sort of their redneck friend. Then Luann starts dating him, and he becomes a more major character. So Lucky's settlement money's running out. He's unemployed. Hank refers him to his friend Dale, who he's going to start working with. They start horsing around. Lucky hops up on a banister, falls, breaks his back, and everyone is heartbroken about the whole situation. Lucky's very calm and enlightened about the whole situation. He's like, "Don't worry, Dale. These things happen. I am going to sue you, though."
You got nothing to be sorry for, Dale. These things just happen. Everything's gonna be fine.
Wow, Lucky. That's really philosophical of you.
Well, I've been through this a couple times before. Of course, I'm gonna have to sue you, but after that, everything's gonna be fine.
Sue me?
Hang in there, buddy. I'm giving you a morphine drip.
Appreciate it. I find that 3 cc's dulls the pain without affecting the admissibility of my testimony.
And mostly what we're going to be talking about is the repercussions of the threat of lawsuit there.
And a key point, Dale, it turns out, does not have any sort of insurance. He has tried to insure himself.
So, by the way, I know we're going to get there. This is me being a business attorney.
Mm-hmm.
The second Lucky said, "I'm going to sue you," the first thought I had in my brain was, well, if you're an LLC and you have your own business insurance, you're actually okay. Mm-hmm. You're going to be fine. And we get very quickly to, like, he tried to insure himself through his own fake company, I guess, which is completely normal in King of the Hill.
I'm not insured!
It's normal for Dale. Like, Dale is the highlight of the show. You guys should watch more of the show just for this character who's like Alex Jones level conspiracy theorist without being toxic somehow. It's just like he thinks
he's strangely self-aware of his incompetence. Overall.
Oh, there's a great line earlier. One of the episodes I thought about doing for this was they are all they all become volunteer firemen, and they're all very excited. and then they have some interpersonal drama, and they're all fighting, not speaking to each other. But one of them sees Dale switching Hank's air tank out with his own, and they think like, oh, Dale's trying to steal the good oxygen or whatever. And Dale's thoughts are no, if we're in real trouble, I need Hank to have all the air because he's going to be the one to save my life. Like, he doesn't trust himself to do it. He knows Hank will save him.
I love it.
All right.
I love it.
Honestly, again, I might have you guys watch that episode after this because it's just a good episode.
Well, and it's funny because like you said, like Geoff said, Dale is surprisingly self-aware to get, and by the way, for Lucky and Dale to be as dumb as they are, for them to have figured out that they needed to fight at the end is remarkable. Like, it's the fact that they were able to look at each other and figure out how to do that is mind-boggling. Next level.
Collectively, they have 2 brain cells.
And I'll talk about that in a little bit.
Yeah. Excellent. But anyway, so
Lucky is one of these characters who, and for right or for wrong, is portrayed as the kind of person who's chasing the next personal injury lawsuit. And occasionally, like, I don't know if you guys have any experience with this. I've heard about these things happening in real life. A former boss of mine used to do personal injury, and somebody called him up and told him they were going to fall next week. And he's like, well, I'm not doing this anymore.
I'm going to fall next week. Be prepared for my call.
Wow. Like, it's like, well, can't represent you and can't really don't think I can do this business anymore.
I mean, the firm I worked at prior to my current job did personal injury, but these were there are photos involved in some of these that you can't forget.
Yeah, I'm not trying to pretend that personal injury, that there's no reason for tort lawsuits, but there is a reputation about personal injury law firms, probably, like, I don't want to say deserved or undeserved, but you do hear stories.
Yeah, you hear stories about them, and like, of course, they refer to as ambulance chasers because, like, you imagine in every TV show, it is a trope. So I'll give Mike credit on this one. It is a trope that there's always a true ambulance chaser who appears in a hospital and starts passing out business cards or whatever, even though it is actually prohibited entirely by most rules of professional conduct. By the way, like, there's literally ambulance chasing rules that say you can't do that. But I will say, like, having worked with a bunch of personal injury lawyers over the years, some of them are very good, by the way. Yeah. They know, like, you could tell them what happened, how much money they lost, what their current job is, and, like, how far along out of their work. And they'll be like, oh, I can get a settlement. And they'll tell you the number they can get the settlement for because they just know the area so well.
Also, this is like anytime you have a subject matter expert on something, like, I have friends who do personal injury law, and I've talked to them, like, A, what should I look for in a car? And B, what car insurance should I get? Because they'll tell you, like, this is the best thing in an accident. These are the people that are, like, give you the least trouble when you actually want something paid out. And it's like, that's good. This is, like, really good information that will affect my life. So, yeah.
Actually, one of Geoff and my, even though she doesn't do personal injury law, but she does sue insurance companies a lot. Very similarly, I have asked her a lot of questions about insurance as to what you should get and what you shouldn't get to make sure that you're properly prepared. So, subject matter experts in the legal field are very helpful.
So,
spoiler alert for some future episode. I guess you know who you are, listener.
I guess we should probably jump into that topic then. Lucky says he's going to sue Dale. Dale has the great line about he's talking to Hank, and Hank says,
well, look, I know this whole thing is asinine, but this is exactly why you have liability insurance. You do have liability insurance, don't you?
Yeah, because you made me. Hey, thanks.
And then he calls himself... The thing about Dale's character, for the people who have not watched it, is the entire show he goes by fake names. Rusty Shackelford is the name that he's been using since season 1. He has a bunch of fake businesses. He's sort of constantly trying to avoid detection. He yells at the mailman for knowing where he lives. Lots of, like, good, dumb little bits like that. So the fact that he would scam himself with a fake insurance companies, he would buy fly-by-night insurance from himself is just a great little joke. I don't think we didn't have anyone covering the insurance other than.
Yeah, I mean, I can do the insurance part.
Yeah.
if you are, and this is not legal advice, this is just very friendly advice. If you're a business, you should probably have some type of insurance. Every business is a little different. Talk to an expert in the area, but get some type of version of business insurance, whether it's a umbrella policy or liability insurance or, director and officer insurance. Make sure you get insurance to cover yourself. That's Derrick's TED Talk. There we go.
If you're a homeowner, if you're a renter, get homeowners insurance. Get renter's insurance.
Yeah,
so you never
that didn't come up in this.
Yeah.
So there's the line that in the show, somebody always pays, which is not true at all.
Not at all.
Terrible, completely untrue. There's lots of people who are judgment proof. For example, Dale. But also, does he not have homeowners insurance? Shouldn't that have jumped in?
I was just going to ask that because, I mean, of course he doesn't.
He should have at some point. The wild thing is there's a whole episode about homeowners insurance. There's an entire episode about homeowners insurance, guys. I didn't make you watch that one. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh,
so,
God.
At the same time, since we're talking about insurance, like Lucky was there to work, and this is their place of business essentially. Isn't this a workers' comp insurance question, really?
Which again,
but that would have paid out very slowly.
Also, he doesn't have.
So a couple of things, Geoff. One, confident he does not have an LLC.
Yeah.
Confident.
Okay. Yeah.
Confident he is not registered properly with the government. Confident that he's not an employee relationship because he basically said show up at 9:00 and he gave him a bug suit.
Sure.
There are so many issues here where there's no way any of that would pay out.
Yeah. Yeah, and we should mention, so we've said LLC a number of times. That is a limited liability company. That is a sort of junior version of a corporation.
How dare you? How dare you junior the corporation?
I mean, but it is.
Well, it is, interestingly, it is not recognized by the IRS as a structure.
Yeah, because it's a state law thing. Yeah.
Right, it's a state law thing. Here's as the guy who has started a lot of companies and deals with a lot of this area, it is generally the easiest structure to start up, especially when you only have a couple people that are running a business and you want to protect yourself from, either clients or customers or anyone else from going after your personal finances. You start up an LLC, and that is what your business is. And your business, you keep your business separate from your personal. And normally, single owner-operator businesses are LLCs. They can be others too. They can be S-corps, which is another version. But a lot of times they are LLCs to protect themselves. I am confident that Dale has not set up any type of business structure.
Probably not. He is what we would call a sole proprietorship.
He is a human who exists with many different businesses.
DBA, some bug spray company. Yeah.
Yes. But anyway, so Mike, continue on with whatever the hell we're talking about.
Boy, listener, you're in for a fun ride. All right.
Sorry, this is a little out of order. As I'm just saying about
is
this,
it?
There's no order. As Geoff said beforehand, let's just talk, and we're just talking.
Pulling the curtain away, my co-hosts are a couple drinks in now.
And it's your fault, for the record.
So, sticking on this potential lawsuit, aside from the fact that it's just complete ambulance chasing, it's also contributory negligence, but I guess Texas is not contributory negligence there, but it uses modified contributory negligence, meaning a plaintiff can recover damages as long as their fault is 50% or less. So that would be a jury question. In this case, Dale and Lucky are dueling with, I guess, some kind of extermination implement, and Lucky jumps up onto a wooden banister and it collapses. Unless, I guess Dale does say he built it and it's not up to code, so I guess that would be a little bit of a point in Lucky's favor. But
Shocking.
also,
now, my client's injuries resulted from an incident involving pesticide spray. Who makes your pesticide? And the answer I'm looking for is one of the deep pocket poison makers. Dow, DuPont, Ciba-Geigy.
I make my own.
Oh, okay. What about the stairs Lucky fell down, were they built by a large developer, successful contractor?
I built them. Without a permit.
Well, Dale's dead bug gets us nothing.
If you jump up onto a banister and you're a full-grown man, like, I don't know, you probably shouldn't expect to come down gracefully.
Jeff, add the fact that he built his own thing without a permit that he fully admits to the list of things as to why nothing would pay out in this scenario.
Yeah.
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 So
I love everything.
To be honest, I'm surprised the house is in his name. The whole a big part of the show is that he's actually kind of a deadbeat.
I would be curious if like it's actually in someone else's name who's dead, whose identity he stole.
So his wife is a fairly successful news anchor. He's just weirdly a deadbeat. Man, we haven't even touched, like, there's so many. We have not gotten to the core of Dale here. There's so many parts of Dale's character we haven't touched, guys.
Clarification: he has a wife.
He has a wife who is maybe briefly in this episode. She has a paramour named John Redcorn. They have a son who's the son of the wife and the paramour. Who he's not. The son is like clearly Native American, and he's completely unaware.
You want to know what? I was about to get to the end of this episode and say I enjoyed this episode. Mike's making me not enjoy it because there's just so much dumb shit about King of the Hill. But
sorry,
anyway.
There's some extra stuff in there.
You got to look at it in a vacuum, Mike.
I'm Derrick.
Derrick, yes, thank you.
I'm Mike.
Excuse me a moment while I have.
And I'm Geoff.
And you're listening too. All right. All right, Geoff, your turn because I'm just really curious what the fuck is gonna happen right now.
Go for it.
So I think it's important here. We've talked about Mike. You touched on comparative liability, and I think it's a good idea to sort of give our listeners a very brief overview of tort law, because it's a huge aspect of the law generally. This is, if you're going to interact with any part of the law, that isn't like the post office or something like that, it's going to be tort law, because someone, the stereotypical slip and fall because someone left water on a store floor or didn't shovel their walkway and it got icy. These are torts. And a tort is just a legal wrong committed by one person against another. There are intentional torts. If I, beat you with a tire iron, that is obviously a crime, but also it is an assault. I'm sorry, actually it is a battery. An assault is an assault in tort law is the threat of me beating you with a tire iron. Me actually beating you with a tire iron is a battery. And in tort law, you have a question of who is responsible for the wrongful act. And it could an injury that befalls you could be due to any number of different things. For example, I mentioned a slip and fall because of like ice on a walkway. Now let's say that it's because you slipped and fell because the homeowner did not maintain their walkway in a way that is, proper,
safe. Yeah,
they have negligently allowed their walkway to become something of a hazard. They're the homeowners responsible. However, if the house or the building that you slipped and fell in front of has gutters that it turns out are faulty and leaked overnight and froze, and the homeowner had no idea, then that's a product liability question. That's still a tort, but the person responsible is the manufacturer of the gutter and not the person who owned the house, because the person who owned the house had no reason to think that overnight this puddle would appear and freeze. And so there are also situations where you could have a number of contributing factors. In this case, you have these two fencing with bug spray wands on a staircase that has been, I mean, this is all pretty much Dale's fault. Let's be clear. Dale seems to instigate this fight, if I remember correctly. He built the stairs. He has hired, in air quotes, I think, Lucky to be his exterminator employee in this fly-by-night exterminator business. And so really, Dale is the person who is on the hook for Lucky falling on this banister. Now, I think, like Derrick mentioned, it's unlikely that he is paying into the workers' comp system, so Lucky is unlikely to get any, payouts for that. And also, I think in most states, workers' comp is paid like, you don't get a big lump sum. You are paid in installments over time as if it was your wages. Which wouldn't help Lucky pay for like his wedding, which is what what he is now aiming to do.
That is the whole purpose of this, is just to pay for his wedding.
Not that he wasn't aiming for that when he fell.
Fair
but
enough.
He's lucky.
But the whole premise of basically the episode is that he's run out of the last settlement money. He needs another one.
Right.
Baby doll, there is nothing I want more than to make your dreams come true.
And since you're rich, you can.
Well, now, my settlement money was down to $9,000 after buying my new truck rims.
You're rich and you can.
Of course, baby girl.
Right. That is the plot. And so, in an effort to help Lucky get money for his wedding, Hank hooks him up with Dale to hopefully have some sort of gainful employment. And as a result, the attorney who's representing Lucky in this fall says, well, we'll go after Strickland Propane because Hank works for Strickland, and Hank, while at work, said you should, hooked you up with Dale for this.
I'm sorry, Dale.
Damn Hank for making me hire you.
Hank? Who's Hank?
We have a 24-hour rule here, Joe Jack.
Good news, Hank. Lucky's not suing me anymore. We've resolved everything.
Oh, thank God. So I guess that means you two are going to have a sensible, inexpensive wedding after all, huh?
Nuh-uh. It's gonna be a blowout.
Mr. Hill, I've filed a lawsuit on behalf of my client against Strickland Propane.
What? How can you possibly sue Strickland?
Because it was you, as a Strickland Propane employee, who set this tragic chain of events in motion.
Yeah, none of this would have happened if you hadn't persuaded me to hire Lucky.
I'm getting my dream wedding.
And so on the theory of what they call respondent superior, which is not the actual term, the correct term, it's Latin, it's respondeat superior. I've heard it said respondit superior, but I don't think that's proper Latin pronunciation. I'm not a Latin. I didn't study Latin in high school or anything.
Latin?
I don't.
Who would have thought?
My
So,
understanding.
Geoff, the way you speak Latin is confidently.
There you go. I think V's or W's, and you pronounce each vowel separately. That is the super succinct way of speaking Latin that is described in the TV series Angel. And if I have the presence of mind, I'll pull that quote and drop it in here.
Oh man, Latin! One of those dead languages you always mean to learn. What? V sounds like W. Say each vowel separately.
However, respondeat superior is the theory of if an employee's actions result in a harm to someone that is legally cognizable, meaning it's something that the courts care about, then under certain circumstances, that wrong can be attributed to the employer rather than the employee, because in most cases, it's the employer and not the employee who's going to have money to compensate you for the fact that you were injured by their employee. Derrick, you look like you have something to say. Oh, Derrick's got the Black Law Dictionary. Oh, okay.
I was just really curious if it gave an alternative pronunciation. It does, but for superior.
What? So superior?
So it is respondiat, which I think is what you said.
Okay, yeah.
Then it's either superior or superior.
Yar.
Fantastic.
I'm happy. I'm so happy I got this book out, which I haven't touched in 3 years, just for this exact moment. So this is, by the way, the 8th edition of Black's Law.
Good, yeah. Of a book that's been existent for 250 years?
Something like that.
Something like that, okay.
The first copyright is 1891, for the record.
Oh, really? That only that long? Interesting. Maybe I'm thinking of Blackstones. Never mind. Okay.
Yeah, but anyway.
That's the whiskey talking.
Oh, yeah, no, because there's a scene in the Abraham Lincoln movie where he has Blackstone, but he doesn't have Black claws. Blackstones.
Yeah. Wow, that is, Mike, that is quite a pull. That is a beta episode from the first run of this show in 2016.
I have a weird memory for that.
That's crazy.
It's funny that Mike doesn't realize we're recording, but he remembers that. I love it.
Whoa! We're recording.
Guys, there's reasons why I love doing these episodes, guys, and this just keeps getting better and better.
Can we just pull the Hank Hill wah?
So back to Hank. I'll cut straight to the point and say a claim against Strickland for this on a theory of respondeat superior would fail miserably.
Shocked.
Just on the basics, because
shocked.
So we're talking about Texas here. This was season 12, so it started in 1997. So we're talking about 2009 ish.
Mm-hmm.
There's a case from the Supreme Court of Texas from 2007 that lays out how respondeat superior in Texas works. An employer may be vicariously liable for the negligent acts of its employee if the employee's actions are within the course and scope of his employment.
Okay.
Now, Hank hooking up Dale and Lucky for Dale to employ Lucky has absolutely nothing to do with the scope of Hank's employment with Strickland. Therefore, there is no respondeat superior, nothing at all. This was what Hank did for a friend of his that happened to take place at his place of work. Furthermore, Hank is not responsible because of what's called proximate cause. Hank connecting Dale and Lucky is not what caused Lucky's injury. It is a cause in a chain of events that's reasonably long. In the last episode of this podcast, where we discussed King of the Hill, where we discussed season 10, episode 10, I mentioned the case Palsgraf. And you can go back and listen to that case for a very brief summary of what Palsgraf is. But essentially, the law does not attribute a wrong to someone who did an act like 5 steps ago, who could not foresee that this wrong would result from their actions. And that is the case here. Hank would have no reason to think that because he connected his friend who has this business with his daughter's betrothed for employment would result in Lucky being injured in this way. So Hank is not responsible. The person responsible here is Dale. But Dale is judgment proof. This is a problem that a lot of attorneys face. When you have a case, someone has a claim against somebody, they've incurred, they've lost a limb or a family member has died, but it's as a result of someone who has no money to compensate them for the loss. And there's very little that you can do in that situation.
Like I will say, even though it's ridiculous, the idea of the attorney, which is to find the deep pockets, is the concept in law sometimes, right? Where like a client says to you, like, this person has done something. It's like, well, can we find someone who can actually pay out?
Certainly.
That is always the question.
And if you don't do that, if you don't find a cognizable theory, and it turns out down the road that they could have recovered, I mean, you could be on the hook for malpractice if you don't try and find a theory by which someone who can compensate your client and make them whole can be held responsible.
Right. That would be a malpractice issue, not what Attorney Johnson said would be a malpractice issue.
That's
which
true.
Is allowing someone to drop their case.
And
I want to jump in real quick and just add, the show brushes past the fact that like Dale has a wife who's fairly successful, and like, although it's not the easiest thing to expect from a spouse who is successful while one spouse is not working or is not successful. Like, I don't think they should conclude that Dale is judgment proof of that brief conversation.
That's a fair point. And I should say,
if anything, that might be malpractice.
I'm basing what I'm saying on what is in this episode. Yeah. I have seen all of 2 episodes of King of the Hill.
And it's basically because Mike forced you to.
Yes.
I'm going to force you to watch some more.
And
Clockwork Orange.
Coming into this episode, I had no idea that Dale was married, that his wife was successful in any way. So, to my mind, looking at just this episode, Dale is essentially judgment proof. He is sort of the quintessential judgment proof tortfeasor.
God, I forgot that word.
I'm amazed that several drinks in, I remembered that word.
Tortfeasor.
Wait, you're several drinks in? No way.
Mm-hmm. So, the last thing I want to touch on, Hank is not responsible. Strickland is not responsible. Dale is the one responsible. And maybe because of his marriage and his wife's success, maybe he does have some assets that could be worth going after. The faux fight that happens at the end of the episode in the lawyer's office, I find it completely ridiculous that the lawyer would pay out anything for them having this, like, his not real injury occurring as a result of them roughhousing in his office against his will. Like, that is not a situation where the attorney would be liable in any way.
Oh, but also kind of like, I know the point of it. The point of it is to use his own dumb logic against him, right? That's the whole point of it. But like, you're telling me that this lawyer, the king of torts, that apparently he won in a lawsuit, because that's a thing. I
forgot about that. Yeah.
I can't believe I'm getting sued, and by Edward Johnson, the king of torts. He won that title in a lawsuit, you know. You gotta help me, Hank.
Would just immediately pay out $53,000 because a guy fell in his office and hurt himself. That someone else hit him.
We should all fall in that man's office.
I would like to go fall in his office right now.
Yeah.
I also like the phrase, I'm going to pay you out your settlement amount.
Your standard amount.
You can't blame this on me. Well, sure we can. According to this tape, Lucky was healthy until he got to your office. I'm sure there's plenty of lawyers who would like to help us make that case. Okay, I hear you. I'll pay your usual settlement quote, but not a penny more.
Like your standard amount. Like Lucky has a standard amount of $53,000 regardless of what happens, or it's so good.
And I will say, well, I guess for like 2009 may not be fairly low, but I think it's fairly low. For this kind of injury, yeah.
I mean, we don't know if it's like, I guess.
Well, he's in a wheelchair.
Yeah,
at least.
That's true.
Anyway,
I mean, he can play golf for a second.
But anyway, let's go to the last super fun conversation for this episode, which literally stems from a 23-second interaction between the characters.
Mr. Johnson, I want to drop the lawsuit. I don't feel right about suing Strickland Propane. They didn't do nothing wrong.
Well, they were in the wrong place at the wrong time. That's 2 wrongs. Look, Lucky, you've got a winner of a case. I'd be guilty of legal malpractice if I let you drop it. You want me to lose my license, do you?
That is some next level manipulation.
First off, laughed out loud.
Wow.
Absolutely laughed out loud at that comment. Was not expecting that. It is. I think it was certainly in this episode like the biggest laugh that I made, and that's just because I'm a nerdy lawyer who was not expecting that answer.
Sure.
In terms of for this podcast, step 1, not a thing. Step 2, definitely not a thing. Step 3, interestingly, brings up some ethical issues, but not like specific. They're like 10.
Almost the opposite of what it should like.
Well, I was actually thinking of saying step 1, not a thing. Step 2, actually the opposite.
Yeah.
Like if your client tells you that, you actually can't keep going in the lawsuit in some ways. So I do want to talk about it because, and I will say like ethical conversations, not exactly like this, but they do come up in private practice all the time, where I've had clients months into a litigation decide that that's the moment to tell me that they've been basically fibbing the whole time about one or two issues. And by the way, I have now changed my sort of introductory conversation with my clients to now say, all right, I have your side. What are they going to tell me? And basically, like what is the thing? Like, what's their story? What are they going to say you did wrong? Or what do they say you didn't do? Or, and like whatever. And it does tend to lead to scenarios where like they do open up a little bit to be like, because I say, I can only represent you if I know what they're going to say. And sometimes they don't. Sometimes it's, sometimes someone gets, I'm just going to use the easiest example. Someone gets fired and claims they have no reason why they got fired. That might actually be true. And it might turn out there was some type of internal thing, or someone actually gave them a bad review that they weren't aware of. Like, it is possible they wouldn't know, but most of the time they probably are aware and just aren't really willing to say it.
Sure.
And certainly in almost every single case I've been involved in, there's sometimes a little bit of bad things on both sides, right? That certainly happens. Not all the time, but, I deal with a lot of construction cases. I deal with sort of, cases like that where like, you know what? There's some sort of bad things on both sides. But there are a lot of ethical conversations that come up. We've certainly talked about this before. I know Geoff has brought up the model rules, which is the American Bar Association has put out model rules of professional conduct, which, as one would think, they are rules that jurisdictions model their rules of professional conduct, which governs lawyers' ethical obligations. The good thing here is we're in Texas. We don't need the model rules. We can look to the Texas rules. So there is the Texas rules of professional conduct. When it comes, generally speaking, lawyers have pretty broad discretion to run the sort of legal side of cases as they seem necessary. This is a profession. It's more of an art, not a science. Every lawyer would make different decisions at different times in cases, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. But the kind of one thing is that the client gets to decide whether to accept or reject settlements, which sort of indicates whether or not the client decides, I don't want to run this case anymore, I don't want to bring this case, or I do want to bring this case, but for different reasons. Now, certainly there are exceptions. None of them apply here, for the record.
No.
But let's talk about it, which is, and like, I'm going to sort of read the sort of general Texas rule, which is, it's Texas Rule Professional Conduct 1.0 or 2.01, which is, as the lawyer, you are advising your clients you should exercise independent professional judgment and render candid advice. So, what's funny, I originally looked at the model rules. The model rules go further and say, in rendering advice, a lawyer may refer not only to the law, but to other considerations, such as moral, economic, social, and political factors that may be relevant to the client's situation.
Sure.
So here, it wouldn't have, so like using that rule and maybe taking the Texas rule and sort of broadening it a little bit, I don't think it would have been inappropriate for the attorney to say to Lucky, like, listen, I think you have a winnable case. I know you don't think Strickland did anything wrong, but like, let's talk about it. Does it make sense to just drop the case right now? Because by the way, at any moment, a client can say, I can drop the case. Once it's dismissed, right? Like, you can't go back on that. So it does require you having an informed consent conversation with the client to explain, like, if it's over, it's potentially over. I am a little curious as to whether this case actually was a case or if they were still in the early stages. Because, as the lawyers would know in the room, there's a very big difference by saying you want to drop a case when the other side has not answered or otherwise been active in the litigation, which means you could drop the case but still have the ability to bring it later, versus the case is ongoing. And in most, certainly in federal courts, and I think in most state courts, once the case is ongoing, you can't just drop the case, we'll say without prejudice, which means with the ability to file the case again, unless you get either court approval or the other side signs on to it. There's got to be some type of consent, which rarely happens, because if the other side has already spent the time and effort, they're not going to allow you to refile again in the future and restart the whole process. So normally, if you are dropping the case in the middle of it, you would have to drop it with prejudice, which means you can't refile the same case. So that would be one thing that like an attorney could say to Lucky, to be like, I want you to understand what this means. I want you to understand that like we can't refile this depending upon the level they're at. There's also another scenario where you would tell a client you probably wouldn't want to drop the case. And it's if there's a counterclaim where the other side is suing you in addition to you suing them. If you say to them, if you drop this case, you basically are just giving them a free shot at you. And now they're the plaintiff, you're the defendant. The only thing that could possibly happen is either you win, and by winning you mean you don't pay anything, you don't do anything, but there's a scenario where you pay them and you don't have any claims against them. So there are scenarios where the lawyer could say to the client, I wouldn't want to drop the case. None of those get to a scenario of I'd be guilty of legal malpractice if I allowed you to drop the case. But it actually did bring up some sort of fun ethical thoughts in my brain. I just love the fact that like a 20-second interaction led to me doing 2 hours of research for the record.
Isn't that always the way?
Welcome to this podcast. Like it's the small sayings where I'm like, but wait, I feel like I read something, and like sure enough, there are cases out there that make it very clear that like you do need to explain to your client what it means to dismiss a lawsuit. Like you need to explain to your client that like if you're looking to dismiss something, it can't just be brought back, like, and that makes perfect sense.
This happened to me. I did a guest interview on another podcast called God Awful Movies, where they were discussing a movie called Suing the Devil. And in that episode,
this was discussed.
Sorry,
this was discussed 2 episodes ago.
Yes.
Yep.
There is a half-second shot, an insert shot of just a complaint. It's not what it's called in the movie, but of a complaint that's being filed in court. And I could have spoken on that for a couple of hours. It was so absurd. So I hear you.
Yeah. No, it's kind of funny how like, and we talked about it with my guest Matt Simpson on the Thomas Crown Affair episode. The Thomas Crown Affair M&A scenes are a grand total of 1 minute and 45 seconds,
Sure.
give or take. And we spent 10 minutes and could have spent 30 more if we really wanted to. Which, I get it. That's not the movie that they give a shit about.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we all know that. But it's fun to talk about.
Oh, definitely.
Because it's so ridiculous. Do we have anything, and now that I've talked about that part, do we have anything else to talk about?
I don't want to spend too much time on it. There's a couple things about admissibility of evidence, and it's mostly just Lucky saying how much morphine he can take when his evidence is still admissible. It's not really relevant because he's not testifying then. Like, he can give the statement to his lawyer later. There's very little chance that anything he says then is actually going to be relevant.
It would have been more fun if he said something like, if you only give me this much morphine, I can do an excited utterance quicker. Like,
yeah,
like
it's Rule 601, Federal Rules of Evidence for competence of testimony. It's just not relevant to what happened. It's a great little line because it's like, oh yeah, you've been here before. This is not your first dance.
It's up there with the Daredevil line of, which helps me more, with bowling alley guy who's like, I felt I was in danger of, I was in fear of
I felt
life.
Yes, both physically and verbally. All right.
What did you
guys think of?
This isn't far. This isn't far off from Mike's real life example of the guy being told, "I'm going to fall next week."
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah,
absolutely. And I have personally been in a couple of instances that are along the line of Derrick, what you were describing earlier, where either a client wanted to take a settlement that was well under what we thought they could get, and we have to counsel them of like, hey, you have the final say, but here's our opinion on this. And that goes to what the model rule is saying of like using your considerations of, whether it's economic or social considerations. And also, especially in the civil rights context, you may, when someone is considering suing the government, especially their local government that like controls aspects of their lives, whether or not they want to pursue a claim that is viable. And I have an obligation to say, you have the ultimate say here. But let me explain why this case could be important and why I think you should continue it.
There are times I communicate a settlement offer to my clients that I know they're going to be offended by, just to like, hey, this is a serious offer. You not saying you should take it or not, but like you should be aware that's being made.
Oh yeah,
because I
absolutely.
Cannot, and I like, I'll know that the client's going to be upset about like, no, that's a fraction of what I wanted.
Well,
but it's like, I still have to tell you.
Right. You have to.
I still have to like.
You have to.
I have to have. I have to have the record of me saying I told you they offered this on this date.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I will say, there are actually scenarios where sometimes I'm shocked at what's come out of it. Like, I'm not saying I've had it on my side. Like, normally I have a pretty good idea what my client is willing or is not willing to take. And like we have that conversation ongoing throughout the case because, as we all know, there's litigation fatigue. There's change of circumstances where originally, I will not take less than $500,000, and then certain things change, and they're like, $250 sounds great. Like that will change.
I could get $250 tomorrow, or down the road, $500.
I actually had scenarios. In fact, one of my sort of first small cases I took on for what ended up being a very relatively good client for me, they asked me to sort of deal with this one little case that was like a $20,000 case that they got sued for, and the other side was just not prosecuting it. So I just waited, and then like a year after we sort of got filed the case, but we never did. This was in New York, where you have to ask for a preliminary conference and ask for a judge to be assigned to your case. Otherwise, it just sits there. And about a year later, I get a random email one day that's like, hey, we're looking to sell this case. We hadn't done anything for a year. And it was like, again, it was like a $20,000 case. I went to my client and I'm like, I assume you don't want to sell this. And they're like, absolutely not. I'm like, well, let's offer them something dumb just to see what happens. So I responded back with, we'll only sell it for nuisance value. And I got a response back being like, what do you consider nuisance value? I said $1,000 and they said done. And it was over, and we sold the case for $1,000. This is why the client has the ultimate say, right? Because you never really know what the other side's going to do or what your side's going to do sometimes.
And that $1,000 was probably far less than what it would have cost for you to continue pursuing the case that they didn't want to be.
Correct.
Yeah. That is the cheaper way out.
A few more hours of work. Yeah.
Exactly.
All right, guys. What did you think of the show? What did you think of the legal aspects?
I mean, I can go first this time because I think this is actually going to be easier. I actually like this episode.
All right.
Again, I am not a King of the Hill fan as a general matter. I had watched episodes back in the day, but haven't watched them in a while. I like this episode, but it's entirely because of the stupidity of the legal shit. Like it entertained the crap out of me. Attorney Johnson is just hilarious. Like, caricature of the King of Torts. He's literally a caricature of the guy you would think of as the King of Torts. And I feel like I've met that guy in my life, during different random cases over my, New York practicing years in DC. So I actually enjoyed this one in a vacuum. I enjoyed this one, so I am affirming in terms of enjoyment. The law side, no, screw it. I just can't. The laws.
I'll go next. They got all of the law wrong all of the time. Loved the show. We'll watch it again. So affirming on liking it, thumbs down on actually getting anything right.
The law's fucked. The law's fucked.
Yeah, I think we're going to be unanimous on all of these. I enjoyed this episode more than the one we reviewed previously. I mean, I wasn't laughing out loud, but I did enjoy it. For a lot of the same reasons that you all have mentioned. And yeah, the law is nowhere near. No, this is not how the law works.
Nope.
I mean, no. So yay for the entertainment value, nay for legal accuracy. No.
And that just shows that King of the Hill really episode dependent, because it was the exact opposite on the last one.
True.
The Not So Grand Jury is sponsored by Morwa P. LLC.
The opinions expressed in the Not So Grand Jury are those of the hosts themselves and not of their respective employers.
The theme music for the Not So Grand Jury is from Gustav Holst's Jupiter and is in the public domain.
If you'd like to get in touch with us, if you want to suggest future movies, or even if you want to offer corrections, you can email us at notsograndjury@gmail.com or message us on any of our social media accounts.
The Not So Grand Jury is copyright 2025, all rights reserved.